Hello, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. With digital technology becoming ingrained in every aspect of retail and loss prevention, from scan and go to mobile pay, facial recognition, real-time information sharing with other retailers and law enforcement, what can we expect to see from the federal government, state governments, and trade associations for help and support? And can we expect legislation similar to GDPR in Europe? With all of these technologies converging so fast, mostly under the auspices of increasing the customer experience and the store safeness, do the customers just ultimately accept these technologies? And with scan and go and mobile pay seemingly producing unheard of fraud levels, how does LP and IT security plug those fraud losses? With us today to speak to this, we have Christian Beckner, Senior Director, Retail Technology at the National Retail Federation, and Bob Moraca, Vice President, Loss Prevention at the NRF. Christian joins the NRF recently after having spent 4 years as the Deputy Director at the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security at George Washington University, and 6 years as a staff member and Associate Staff Director with the U.S. Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Gentlemen, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you.
Pleased to be here.
So the biggest question is, can we in the U.S. expect anything even close to GDPR, or are they going to continue to leave it up to the states, in your opinion, Christian?
So I think it's unlikely that we'll see federal legislation similar to GDPR anytime soon coming out of the U.S. Congress. But I think the more interesting questions are, how is GDPR as it's implemented in Europe going to affect what we see in terms of the way American retailers have to change their business processes. And then I also think if you look at consumer sentiment on privacy issues in light of some of the, Facebook's testimony on the Hill recently, right, and other actions, will companies see it as their own advantage, even without needing legislation, to be more sensitive towards privacy from a consumer standpoint? So I don't know that federal action is likely in the near term, but I think we'll see a shift in the way companies respond to these privacy concerns, both based on what happened in Europe and on just their own business rationale to do so.
Well, and especially the international retailers, in order to do business over there, they have to comply.
Right.
So is that going to be the tail or the pulling the dog is in order to be accepted over there and to do business over there? And then some of the retailers around them are going to start looking at that as they set the standard by adopting the rules and regulations of it.
Yeah, and the internet is a global system, so it's hard to differentiate between a European consumer and an American consumer. So in some cases, it may be easier for companies just to adopt a single privacy standard that they follow, rather than have differentiated standards for Europeans and Americans or individuals from elsewhere in the world.
With cities, states, and the federal government and law enforcement utilizing facial recognition, and now it's being used in retail, do you see this becoming more commonplace, especially given the rise in active shooters and the public's increased demand and expectation for safety?
So facial recognition technology has come a long way in the last 15 years. I remember when I was first working on Homeland Security issues right after 9/11, and it was, the false positive rates were in the range of 20 to 30%. Now we're at the point where, we're over 99%, 99.9% accuracy. So, you do see applications of facial recognition finally moving into the consumer space. You see it deployed in sensitive facilities at high-profile events like the Super Bowl. So you're seeing that shift where retailers are looking at it as, as an option within their portfolio of security technologies that they're deploying, and I think some are starting to move towards that. I think there are two key questions that they need to ask as they're looking at facial recognition. How do you adjust your employee training if you're using it? So if you think about using it, identifying a potential, known shoplifter or known criminal, how are you going to respond in terms of your training? How do you deal with the risk of a false positive where it looks like somebody, but you're always going to have that, even with the technology improving, you're always going to have that risk of a false positive where, what looks like a match is somebody who's an innocent customer and how are you going to respond to that? I think the other issue is, how do you explain to your customers, that the collection of this information, how are you using it, how are you storing it? is there a degree of consent that is expected for consumers? Are there risks to your business by going too fast to deploy this without consumer awareness of how it's being used? And if you're storing it, what are the risks if that information is stolen or there's some sort of data breach that you need to respond to? So all those issues are ones that retailers will need to think through as they look to deploy facial recognition technology.
Bob, any thoughts there?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's a concern with a facial fingerprint that somebody can, if it's digital, it can be manipulated. It can be stolen. All of a sudden, Bob Moraca appears committing some crime somewhere. I mean, it's a very interesting dilemma that we're dealing with. And frankly, I always get this from people who are on the other side of this issue. I think that it has a place and it can be used as another tool. What about a twin? You know, and you get these things that you don't really have no answer for that, yet. So I see it as an emerging technology still. I think it has value. We've learned more as it's been used in the military and the law enforcement world. But I'm not sure it's ready for prime time, depending on how we're going to use it and store that information and protect that piece of the information. It's still interesting, and there's a lot of privacy concerns yet.
Right,
I think to be developed. The courts haven't taken this stuff on yet, and that's going to dictate some of the rollout.
Right. Well, there's a couple of lawsuits right now, one in Illinois and
right.
I believe
Pending.
state of Washington, that are really going to be, determine some of the direction, I think.
And facial recognition specific, you've made it to the top with that issue when there's countermeasures out there now being developed. I would, for your listeners, go to a website called CV Dazzle.
CV Dazzle?
CV Dazzle. They've already got
Dazzle.
That's correct.
Okay.
They've already got makeup with metallic things in it that you can wear that throws the recognition off. They've got hair clips that kind of swing down to cover about 1/3 of the face. They've got hats with a mesh that. Oh yeah. And so
what's that again?
This is the countermeasures.
I know, but what's the name?
CV Dazzle.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So when somebody's developing the countermeasure for your technology, you've arrived.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of interesting, to keep
The
an eye on.
aftermarket.
Yes, the
Yeah,
aftermarket.
it's always gonna be there.
I'm upset I didn't think about it.
Yeah, you might want to take that back. No, I'm only kidding. Yeah. Christian, can you give us a feel for what the NRF is focused on from an IT security perspective? Will any of it help the loss prevention efforts?
So I lead our IT Security Council, about 225 NRF members, representing about 150 companies who are involved in cybersecurity within their enterprise. And one of the first things I've done in taking on the role is trying to take a fresh look at what more we could be doing to better serve that community and better serve the retail sector as a whole in terms of cybersecurity. So a few ideas for things that we're working towards. So we have an existing threat alert system where we share cybersecurity information coming from the government, coming from other sectors. So looking at options to expand that, enhance its capabilities, create the ability for real two-way collaboration and information sharing among the sector and with other sectors. Doing more in terms of benchmarking and best practices. So one of the challenges that the companies face is sort of knowing how well they're doing in comparison to their peers and addressing all of the various parameters of cybersecurity. So working with different private sector partners to look at those issues for creating some different tools, retail sector specific, for benchmarking and best practices. And third, I think looking at ways we can engage more beyond the IT Security Council with the other parts of the enterprise that have responsibility for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity risk is really a whole of enterprise risk. So, loss prevention is part of that, but also the finance and audit side of companies, legal, communications, HR, and then the C-suite and the board. So I'd like to move us forward to take an approach where we're really addressing all of those communities and thinking about cyber risk and building on the work that's been done to date by NRF, but taking that a step further.
With Scan and Go, and this is a question for both of you, and with Scan and Go and mobile pay being the biggest payment disruptors in history, we've begun to hear some huge fraud numbers. What's the answer? And how does IT security and LP work together on this? Is that collaboration becoming more and more prevalent and important?
Yeah, I think there are examples among retail companies where you do have that close collaboration between the IT security side and the loss prevention side. I think that came out of the National Retail Survey that I think there's some companies that need to do more, and there's always room for greater collaboration between the two groups, whether you're talking about collaboration on analysis and investigation, having a more streamlined approach to reach out to law enforcement instead of the physical security and the cybersecurity, each having their own channels to the FBI or Secret Service or state and local law enforcement, having that collaboration in terms of the outreach. And then, and I think, we're working, Bob and I, together to figure out ways that we can bring our two councils, our two groups more closely together, in the coming months and years, that, whether it's, at events like this or through other meetings or forum that we may be having.
Bob, any comments on the fraud numbers with Scan and Go? And
Yeah, I think the
not
jury.
that I would ask you to quote anything.
No. I think the jury's out. We're trusting our retailers. We're trusting the human nature of individuals. We've seen the numbers really go astray with just the self-checkout.
20 to 25%.
That's right. I mean, so you look at that and you go, oh, that surprised me, even. So now if we're just going to trust somebody, just walk in the store, pick up their items, and walk out, boy, I just think I don't know. I'm not sure how it's going to work. It's really a new paradigm. Retailers may have to take higher risk if they're willing to, or get a fast pass for those customers that they know are legitimate and good and honest and have integrity. I'm not sure how it's going to work. I mean, I'm along for the ride, but I'm just not sure.
Right.
So,
Christian, welcome to the retail world.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to thank you for watching. And until next time, let's keep them all safe out there.